Welcome to GardenDC, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine, and we're aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 166 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we chat with Jon Traunfeld, Program Director of the UMD Home and Garden Information Center, all about growing figs. The plant profile is on Cleome, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with Dr. Allan Armitage, who returns to share the last word on critters. This episode, we're joined by Jon Traunfeld, Program Director of the University of Maryland Home and Garden Information Center, and we're going to be talking to him all about growing figs. Welcome, Jon.
Oh, thanks, Kathy. It's lovely to be here.
Great to have you. So, Jon, I've known you, I want to say, since I was a baby gardener, but maybe not that long, but for years. And wonderful to finally have you on the podcast.
Yeah, it's really a thrill for me, and we are big fans of you and Washington Gardener, Kathy, and appreciate all that you have done to teach and promote gardening in the DMV.
Thanks so much, Jon. And you've done so much work too, which we're going to get into in a second. So at the Garden DC podcast, we like to ask if you were born with chlorophyll in your veins and a green thumb, or did that come later in life?
Maybe a little bit of both. I grew up in an urban neighborhood in Queens, and my dad always planted one tomato plant and a few marigolds. That was the extent of the gardening. Although a lot of people in my neighborhood had a fruit tree in the backyard, and we had a tart cherry, which I remember very fondly, and also remember seeing figs growing both during the growing season, and I remember them tied down to the ground in the wintertime.
So in Queens, New York, is that zone 6 or so?
Uh, I would say 6 or 6B, maybe 6B.
hmm
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit more protection for figs needed in 6
Yes.
than here in 7. And we'll get into that in a
Yeah.
bit for our
Yeah.
Mid-Atlantic gardeners. And probably things have changed over the years too.
Yeah.
So after your childhood in Queens, where did you go to college? Did you pursue a horticultural degree?
No, actually, I went to Grinnell College in Iowa, and my degree was in American Studies with a minor in biology. And then I earned a master's degree in agricultural extension education at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and also became a vegetable grower in East and Middle Tennessee, um, and also managed a small vegetable marketing cooperative while I was in Tennessee. And then in the late 80s, moved back to the Mid Atlantic. Uh, my family had moved to Maryland when I was in junior high school, and I was really happy to come back and started my career with University of Maryland Extension in 1989.
Wow. And so what position did you start with at University of Maryland?
Sure. I was in Baltimore City in the extension office there, and I was the urban gardening coordinator. So I worked with a team. We went out and helped people organize and develop community gardens on vacant lots, including nutrition classes. And that was part of a larger USDA program that existed in 23 different cities across the US. So that was really exciting. And also co ran the Master Gardener program in Baltimore City with Wanda McLaughlin, and saw a lot of fig trees. In fact, I was really surprised. I saw more fig trees in my first few years in Baltimore than I had seen in 12 years living in Tennessee.
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah, after working in the city, I came out to the Central Maryland Research and Education Center, and that's in Howard County. And it is where the Home and Garden Information Center and the State Master Gardener office are located. So I came out, I was an extension specialist in community food production and served as the State Master Gardener Coordinator. And then after a number of years, I became the director of HGIC. And we have a relatively new State Master Gardener Coordinator since 2019. Steph Pulley has been the leader for our Master Gardener program.
Hmm. And we've had some past Master Gardener heads and extension people on the podcast, but maybe you really quickly talk about the relationship of the USDA to the extension and the agricultural based colleges like University of Maryland.
Sure. Well, so University of Maryland is a land grant university, and as all other land grant universities, we have an extension service. We're called University of Maryland Extension. So we do receive federal dollars through USDA as well as state and local dollars. And Extension is the outreach education arm of the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So we have, undergraduate and graduate instruction on campus. We have our Ag Experiment Station facilities, and then Extension, is the third leg of that stool. So hopefully a lot of your listeners know about, the Master Gardener program, all the support we give to ag producers in the state, our 4-H youth development program, family and consumer sciences, excuse me. We also do a lot of work in the nutrition area through SNAP-Ed and FNEP, Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program.
Hmm. And I do find the general public still has confusion over the master gardener title a little bit. They think it's like master plumber or master electrician.
Sure. Well, that name was selected, and for good or bad, it has been the name. I think it's been a wonderful program. In fact, I think this is the 50th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, of the program this year. And so Master Gardener volunteers receive 40 hours at a minimum of training from the university, and then they're lifelong learners. So after basic training, they're continually improving their skills and their knowledge through classes and workshops, and um, you know are out there helping people solve problems at plant clinics. We have a big Grow It Eat It program that promotes and teaches food gardening. We are out there, Baywise landscaping program, helping people develop pollinator and native plant gardens. So a lot of really important work that's addressing a lot of the big issues that we're facing.
Hmm. And it's mainly on a volunteer basis. They're
Sure.
earning hours.
Yep.
I
Yep.
think it's depends on the master gardener program, but usually required 100 hours of service or something in that area per year.
Yeah. Ours is 40 hours in order to become certified in the
Hmm.
in the first year or so, and then after that, it's 20 hours of service a year to maintain your certification, plus 10 hours of continuing education.
Hmm. That seems pretty great, sweet deal, especially you get to hang out with other gardeners and
You
help
know,
other people gardening.
That is right. I think that is the best part of it. It's the continual learning and doing it with other people who are really as interested as you are in the different subjects.
Hmm. Right. So I wanted to ask a little bit about what you personally grow and like to grow at home before we dive into our fig subject.
Sure. I have a decent sized vegetable garden. I've been in the same location for about 28 years. So I grow a lot of different vegetables. I mean, I personally love tomatoes so much that I grow about 30 plants a year, and then lots of other vegetables as well. I like to grow garlic. although I've had a bad problem with a soil-borne disease, white rot, which has really cut my yields over the years, and I'm going to have to move outside my vegetable garden fence, I think, to grow garlic next year. And I've grown a lot of different small fruits over the years, and I have had the same fig tree for about 28 years.
And do you know what variety that fig is?
Well, funny you should ask, Kathy. I had the barber that I used for a number of years after moving to Baltimore was Italian American, and he gave me a cutting from his tree. And he told me he grew up in Little Italy in Baltimore, and he told me that the tree came from Italy. And but of course he doesn't know, what the cultivar is, and it's been a wonderful tree for us. The fruit looks a lot like the brown turkey fig,
Mm,
but really don't know
yeah.
exactly what it is. It's sort of like a lot of vegetatively propagated plants have this problem in that there are a lot of varieties that go by different names. It's the same one variety, but it may have multiple names,
hmm
and that's okay too. you know.
Yeah, and I hear that story so many times, and I have that same thing. I got my fig as a cutting from a very large fig, historic fig in
Yeah,
downtown Tacoma Park that was removed because they expanded the fire station, and people were extremely upset about losing that tree. So a lot of cuttings were propagated from it, but that was there from, probably Victorian age, so nobody knows exactly what it was. So we just have to
yeah.
guess, and I'm guessing probably yours is brown turkey and mine is brown turkey
Yeah,
too.
could be. And we're happy.
And I was gonna say that until that day comes, maybe sooner rather than later, that we can pull our phone out of our pocket and do a DNA check,
Yeah,
just by like taking a piece of the like little cell or leaf material. I think the day is coming, and then we'll be able to say for sure this is what it
yeah,
is.
yeah, that's right. The same things happen with garlic varieties. I think
hmm
by doing some DNA fingerprinting, they found that a lot of varieties are actually many fewer actual varieties.
hmm Yeah, I think there are so many different names for what basically is like the German white or
Mm-hmm.
purple stripe. Those are just like the two main ones, but
Yeah,
every little town, or hamlet named it for themselves.
sure, sure.
Or
Yeah,
it's like Aunt Betty's purple stripe or blah blah blah. So
yeah,
yeah, it gets that. And I think tomatoes sometimes that happens too with a few of the heirlooms get
yeah,
named even though they're the same ones.
absolutely.
Hmm. So let's talk a little bit about that fig propagation, how we were able to take those cuttings so easily and make new plants.
Yeah.
So figs are great because they are a wonderful pass along plant.
Yes, very easy to propagate. I mean, you can take dormant cuttings that are from 2 to 3 year old stems and root them. You can in the spring take cuttings of new shoots. You can actually dig out new shoots with some of the root attached. You can lay down stems and have them propagate that way by pinning them to the soil, and they will root below the growing point. So very easy plant to propagate.
Hmm. Is there a best time of year to take cuttings?
Well, I guess it depends on whether or not you want to do it when they're dormant. I mean, that is what a lot of people do, but I haven't found really much difference between taking dormant cuttings. To me, that's a little more trouble because then I've got to deal with them when we're not in the growing season, and unless you do it late winter, but even then it's still kind of cool outside. So if you don't want to have to take them indoors and you just want to do all the propagation outdoors, I would recommend doing it in spring.
Hmm. And for a cutting, usually you would say maybe at least a foot long with a growth node on it.
Yeah, even I mean 8-inch cuttings length would be fine. Pencil thickness, and just you could use anything from a quart size down to a 4-inch pot. I've used mostly just lightweight soilless growing mix. The important thing really is to make sure that the cuttings are growing with some humidity. So put the cutting, in a plastic bag that's got some holes poked in it, out of the sun. Just moisten the root system. Let the root system or the mix dry out a little bit before you rewater it. But making sure that the plant's growing with some humidity around it.
Hmm. So maybe could use like one of those 2-liter plastic bottles with the bottom cut
Sure.
off,
Oh
something like
yeah.
that, or a milk
Mm-hmm.
jug, just making a little mini greenhouse, but making sure it's vented.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, you want to have it like completely closed off.
Yeah.
But yeah. So let's turn to other ways we might get a fig. Like you might move into a place and there's a fig tree. and,
Yes.
and you inherit
That
it.
that
There's
happens a lot. Yeah.
there's that way. Another way besides going and taking cuttings or having a cutting from somebody else is you might purchase one from a
Yeah.
specialty fruit tree seller. Is there any that you like in particular?
Well, we don't recommend specific businesses,
Hmm.
but I would say I've noticed more and more local nurseries are carrying figs, which is good. And I think I have seen some of the better known varieties that are cold hardy, like brown turkey, Celeste, hardy Chicago, at local garden centers and nurseries. So that would be one place to look. You can certainly go online. There are some small, very specialized fig growers out there, who are propagating and selling figs. And so, yeah, it wouldn't be very hard to find plants to buy.
Hmm. And I find that they're not too expensive, maybe $25 for a 1 gallon pot of like, I'm going to say a 1 to 2 year old tree.
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah, that sounds
terribly
about right. I
expensive.
mean, I've seen them up to $60 for less popular, less well-known varieties.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it can vary quite a bit. And
Yeah.
one thing I would say, we do get people contacting us about fig plants that they received as a gift. They didn't know the variety, they planted it, and for some reason, no matter what they do, those figs will not ripen,
Hmm.
you know, before the end of the summer. And so there are some varieties that are like that, and so it's really useful to be able to know the actual cultivar rather than just planting, whatever somebody gives you.
Hmm. Yeah. And if you can actually taste and see the fruit from the plant that you might take a cutting from a friend's garden, then you're ahead of the game, at least there.
Even better.
Hmm.
Yes. I haven't had a fig that I didn't like. I'll say that. Some are sweeter than others, certainly. And of course, all different colors on the outside and inside. But, you just can't buy fresh figs very easily. And so it's just such a treat to have this tree in your garden. And the other thing that's so fabulous about figs is they're just easy to grow. And we spend a lot of time helping people deal with problems having to do with peaches and apples being planted. I think a lot of people plant fruits that they really like to eat, but they haven't researched them and realized that they might have some pretty significant pest problems. So we're always promoting figs because they are really pretty easy to grow, and will grow well anywhere in Maryland given the right amount of protection.
Hmm. And I think throughout the mid-Atlantic region, except for, maybe the coldest part of a mountain
Yeah,
top,
that would be a little tough.
you might need
Yeah,
to give it a little protection there, maybe do it in a container and bring it in the garage or a protected
yeah,
area.
exactly.
If
That would
if
be the way
you're
to go.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you were like a zone 5 or something maybe,
Yeah.
then you might do protection, which does bring up that figs are perfectly good in a container, a large
Oh
container.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny. I grew figs, two plants in half whiskey barrels because I just figured, to be able to get a decent amount of figs, I was going to need a large container. And of course, it did allow the tree to grow larger. But when it came time to pull that plant out to get it into the garage, it was quite difficult. And the other thing that I did wrong the first year was just placing a container right on the ground. And so the roots grew through the bottom of the whiskey barrel into the ground and made it super difficult. I had to sever the root and then turn that whiskey barrel on its side and yank it out. It was extremely heavy. Finally got it in a wheelbarrow, each one
Mm.
separately, and got them in my garage. But that's just too much work. And I haven't done this, but I've seen it in a number of places. People growing in containers as small as 5 gallons, but I think like 10 to 15 gallon containers are a nice size. Still can get a little bit heavy, especially 15 gallon, but it'll give you a larger, maybe you can then grow one or two stems that'll get 6 to 8 feet tall and produce a pretty good number of figs.
Hmm. So, since we're talking about containers and those thick roots,
Yeah,
let's talk about planting. So, you got your
yeah,
baby cutting that has rooted, and you take it out of its big pot and you want to put it in the ground instead of in a
yeah.
container. Any planting tips?
Full sun is number one. A lot of people who are failing with figs just have them in a place where they're not getting enough sun, or trees have grown and are shading the fig that used to be productive.
Mm,
Really, any decent soil, I would amend it with some compost, but figs will grow in fairly poor soil. They don't like wet feet, so you want to make sure the soil drains well. One thing I noticed when I was working in Baltimore City, in the Greek neighborhood in East Baltimore, a number of people had corrugated metal that they drove into the ground maybe 3 feet out from the base of their fig trees, basically to try to limit the root growth because
mm,
fig roots will grow far and wide, and that can be a problem. And actually, in some cases, especially if the soil is extra rich, it can lead to a lot of nice top growth, but not a lot of figs. So in those cases, you can try to contain the root system or root prune. Just drive a spade into the soil, um, in a circumference around a fig plant.
hmm. That's great advice. Yeah, I'd always heard of how greedy the roots are around
Yeah,
a fig
yeah,
and that you should never plant anything in competition with it. So it
yeah,
wants to be
yeah.
fairly below, right below the surface, like just below the surface. The roots are staying in that zone. And that if you planted, say, a ground cover around it or try to put
Hmm.
perennials underneath, then you're robbing the nutrients from the tree.
Yeah, it usually is best to just have it in its own location. Some people, if you're lucky enough to have a south-facing wall, that's a nice, location for a fig in terms of um, keeping it from getting so cold
Hmm.
around the tree.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of that cold tolerance. So,
Hmm.
a normal winter, if we ever have one here in the Mid Atlantic, um, if the fig is 1 or 2 years old, you might want to give it some protection, right? And then after that, it's probably okay on its own.
Yeah, it so much depends on the variety, the location, and the kind of winter we're having. But I think that's actually very sound advice to protect it for a few years. Even though we had the warmest, I don't know if last winter was the warmest on record or one of the warmest for sure in the Mid Atlantic, we still had that very hard freeze period in
Hmm.
late December, early January. So you got to just count on extremes being the norm, and so it can get very cold. So any temperatures down below 20 degrees Fahrenheit can injure wood. Um, Younger wood is going to be more susceptible. So right, covering plants when they're young is especially important.
And I like to just mound chopped up leaves around it, maybe put like a
Hmm.
little upside down tomato cage and stuff that with the leaves. How do you like to protect your tender figs?
I've done different things. I have pulled. I mentioned when I grew up in New York, I would see that that a lot of gardeners would. They had they would maintain their fig trees so that they were practicing like renewal pruning. So they never had stems that were over 2 or 3 years old. So they were more supple and they could tie them together, cover them with a tarp or a blanket, and then pin them to the ground. And then even then you could cover that further with leaves if you wanted to. So I've done that. Mostly what I've done is what you've mentioned, Kathy, is I've just gotten neighbors bags of neighbors' leaves and just piled the bags around my fig tree. Sometimes, you know, doing it in a pyramidal kind of form so that they're bags on top of bags, too high, and that's worked out pretty well. I've also tried to surround the plant with chicken wire and filled it in with leaves. There are lots of ways. Some people use actually insulating material, bubble wrap, and things like that. Whatever will you know prevent the temperatures from getting so low. And actually, you're really cutting down the amount of wind,
Mm,
cold wind hitting the tree. The one downside of all these winter protection methods is you gotta kind of be careful that you're not setting up a nice cozy home for voles, because I've had that happen where they've just gotten in around the base of the tree all comfy with that leaf protection, and in the spring pull all that away and you see the entire base of my tree was girdled, and it didn't kill
yikes.
the tree, but it was gnawed continuously all the way around the base of the tree.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point to maybe on one of those mild winter days, like when it gets to 60 or something,
Yeah.
maybe go in there and pull back the surrounding material and just inspect it,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
maybe. So we have had a couple freak winters where the figs have almost died all the way back to the ground. In the last 10 years, I can remember one
Sure.
blizzard where people were saying their figs are just gone, they're dead.
Yeah.
And the great thing about figs, we've talked about many great things about figs,
Yeah.
but they're pretty root hardy.
Yes.
So all the top growth might die, you might need to remove it, but the plant will probably still return.
I think maybe one time somebody told me that their fig was completely killed,
Hmm.
but that's in 30 years. And so you're right. They will always come back from the roots. And of course, the problem is that those shoots that come back in that next growing season won't have enough time typically to mature the crop. And so you'll get figs forming. It's very frustrating, but they won't produce figs that will mature in time.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think even that happens sometimes when we have a late frost and then in the spring and then an early frost in the winter. Depending on the type of figs you have, you might not get ripe figs that year.
Yeah, yeah, that can happen. This past year, I did cover. I whacked my tree back, and like a lot of people, mine is multi-stemmed. I have probably 5 or 6 hefty stems that are 3 or 4 inches in diameter, and I cut them back and just so that there's less exposed wood that I can't protect. But this past year, it was a hard enough freeze in December that when took a razor and cut through the bark in the spring to see if my stems were alive or dead, and I saw green tissue, but it took a long time for the buds to break from those overwintered stems,
Hmm.
and that really delayed growth, and it delayed fruiting. And so, one tip when something like that happens, and even if we don't have a hard winter, it's really good to cut back shoots in the spring and to force branching. There's some thinking that that could also hasten ripening, but I don't know that there's any research that really can verify that.
Hmm. Yeah, and pruning figs is such a complicated topic, and we'll go over that in a little bit,
Okay.
but also such an easy topic because I think you can cut back figs and they are so forgiving almost any time of year, right? And almost whacking away if it's getting too big or too tall or taking back whole
Yeah.
sections all the way to the ground. And the plant is not going to die. If you did that to, say, an apple tree,
Right.
or other fruit tree, that's not gonna be as forgiving.
Good point. Right. You can do just about anything to a fig, and it's going to survive, and it'll continue to produce figs.
Hmm. So what is your best advice for pruning? Like, when do you get out there and cut back yours?
Sure. So, I mean, number one is to make sure you don't have any, that your stems aren't crowded. And if they are, you may need to remove one. You want to remove any crossing branches, any shoots that are growing up in the middle of the plant and aren't going to get enough sun. They're going to be weak, just to take all of those out. In fact, unless you're going to be selecting new shoots from the root system to become new, main stems, you really want to remove all of those shoots in the spring. And then I just mentioned pinching, and I think that can be useful. So with new shoots, pinching back the tips will, just promote branching and should lead to more fruiting. So the shoots I'm talking about now are shoots that are growing off of the main stems, not, new suckers or shoots coming from the ground. These are the shoots that are breaking off the wood, you know, that was formed in previous years. So those shoots, if they're pinched or cut back, they'll branch, and you should get more production.
Hmm. And are you cutting back to a growth node or bump, or just above it or just below it?
Yeah, just above a node would be fine.
Hmm. And if the node is inward facing, it will probably send growth that direction into the tree. And if the growth node is outward facing, similar to roses, hopefully you're directing it out to grow outside the main tree.
Correct. Right. Yes.
Hmm. Yeah, it takes a little bit to like, at least with figs, the growth nodes are a bump and very noticeable. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can just run your thumb over, you can see them pretty plainly with your eyes. With some other fruit trees and other trees, you really have to look for those growth nodes.
Sure. Yep.
Hmm. And so I was going to say another great attribute of figs that we didn't talk about yet is you only need one, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of other fruit trees, you need a male and a female, or sometimes you need it to be grafted onto another hardier rootstock of that
Yep.
same variety. But figs are on their own roots, and they'll,
Right.
like we said, they die back and they'll come back on them. But also, they don't need to cross pollinate.
Right. They're parthenocarpic. I mean, the common figs that are grown throughout Maryland and most of the country are parthenocarpic. They don't need to be pollinated. And so, the fig is this weird, the fruit is a weird fruit stem that then sort of encompasses the flowering parts, the reproductive parts. And so inside the fig, you can actually see tiny little female flowers. They don't need pollination. They are able to produce fruit without that.
Mhm. And I think a lot of people have heard maybe from National Geographic Channel or something like that, or watched an online video and seen these figs that need this specialized wasp
Yeah.
to be with them. But that's not the case, I believe, of the varieties we're growing.
Right, right. Those would be the Smyrna figs or the San Pedro figs. There you need the Capra fig is a separate fig tree that has male flowers, and there's a little wasp that moves the pollen from the Capra fig over to the Smyrna figs. and those are grown mostly in California. And those would be probably, if you do see fresh figs in the store, they might be those Smyrna figs.
That's true. Occasionally at some of the high-end grocery stores, you might see some fresh figs. Occasionally at the farmer's market, somebody local might have extra that they're selling. Jump
Yeah.
on them if you see them because
Yeah.
very short season, right?
Yeah.
And then the only other way I think people encounter figs, maybe in a jar, like jarred or
Hmm.
jam, or as fig Newtons. And then
Yeah.
they eat a fig Newton as a kid and they think
Yeah.
that's what a fig is. So,
I don't want any more.
mhm. And maybe you like the fig Newton or you're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah,
Right.
man,"
Sure.
but that's not let's describe, the experience of a fresh fig, John. So,
Yeah.
when you pick it
Oh.
off the tree,
Oh
what are
my
you looking
gosh.
for a ripe fig? What are you
Well,
looking for?
so people say the neck of the fig should be a little bit limp or softened. I look at color, and basically I just put my fingers on the fig and I can tell if it's near ripe or it's fully ripe. And of course, if it's fully ripe, I'm bringing it in. But one thing I've learned, Kathy, not just in recent years, is that they will continue to sweeten and
Mhm,
ripen and develop aroma if you pull them when they're just nearly ripe but not fully ripe. So if you're concerned about ants getting through that little hole at the end of the fig, or there's rain coming, go ahead. And those figs that are fully colored, but they're not, you, there's some give there, but they're not fully ripe, I would pull them. And on the counter, they will continue to ripen for the next 12 to 24 hours.
mhm. Yeah, I think officially they're ripe already, but they'll soften a little for you,
Yeah.
on the counter, and then I the things I look for is kind of that droop that you talked about, the neck
Yeah.
bends over, also that they have a little bit, like, of the sticky sap on the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
on that little hole coming out, that tells
Yeah.
me that's ripe, and I've picked some unripe, not quite ripe figs and
Yeah. Yeah.
eaten them, it hasn't
Yeah.
hurt me. It's
No, no, they don't have
yeah.
any flavor, but they won't kill you. That's right.
Mhm. They're fine. And so let's jump to the ways that we like to enjoy figs, and then we'll talk about some of our favorite varieties and the ones that are
Okay.
available in our
Yeah.
area. So I'm assuming you like to just eat it straight off the tree.
We eat a lot
Hmm.
of figs. And then I also learned not too many years ago that they freeze beautifully. And so we'll just rinse them underwater for food safety reasons, and just pat them with paper towels. And I don't flash freeze them. I'll just put them in a bag and put them in the freezer, and they've come out fine. Now you can, put them on a cookie sheet, separate them, and put them in the freezer, and that way they won't be all glommed together when you defrost them. But the texture and the flavor was really surprisingly good. I mean, to use them in cakes or puddings or jams or something along those lines.
Yeah, I never would have thought of freezing them because I would have thought, they would have crystallized or get something. So that's great to know if you have a bumper crop of figs
Hmm.
and you actually have extra, you don't consume them all straight off the tree, which I tend to do.
Yeah.
So, one way, a friend of mine's father, who's from Italy, he would go out in the garden with a piece of white bread, loaf of white bread, and he would just smash the figs and have just fig sandwiches.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's the way he enjoyed them, and they weren't coming in the house even. He was standing out there eating them.
That is
Um,
funny.
yeah, my favorite way is with, like, a soft cheese on a cracker. So, some
Sure.
type of, like, soft, mild cheese, smushed on, and then I smush kind of the fig on top of it, like, I'll cut the fig in half and just kinda
Oh,
smash it
yeah.
on there, so it's really
Oh,
good.
that is good. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it blends so well with some of the soft cheeses, but, of
Hmm.
course, straight, is good as well, and, fig jam, if you have extra, again, great way to have
Hmm.
it. And I was thinking about, those people who have never, ever tasted a, um, fig straight off the tree, trying to describe the flavor to them, John. So it's like a light berry flavor, I guess is the maybe if they've had a kiwi, kind of like that?
There are different figs that are described that way as having more
Hmm.
of a berry flavor. I I, I think it's pretty unique. The skin is, of course, has there's that texture contrast between the skin and the pulp, um, and it's just so unique. I don't know that I have words to compare it to other fruits, but there are people that do not like figs. They really don't like them. And I
Hmm.
don't know what the breakdown is in the general population, but yeah, it's got a wonderful texture. It's very fresh. It's very refreshing. It's sweet. Some are sweeter than others, but it's really quite unique among
Hmm.
fruits.
Yeah, and it almost has sometimes a little crunchiness, in the texture. Depends
Hmm.
on the
Hmm.
variety. But yeah, overall sweet. I think if you like apricots, peaches, any of the like soft stone fruits, you're gonna like figs.
I
Um,
would
like
hope so. Yes.
So, we talked a little bit about that myth of the wasp that has to fertilize all figs, and we know it's just for those couple varieties. But
Yeah.
how do you deal with the wasps and hornets that love to be around
Yeah.
the ripening fruit?
You have to, again, you just have to be out there once or twice a day. I mean, if you really want your figs, um, and you can, I would suggest trying to go out twice a day when they're really coming in, and just recognize you're not going to get them all. There are lots of, yellow jackets and wasps, and that will get your fruit. Um, Now, squirrels are a whole nother story because I have squirrels in my neighborhood, in my landscape. They get into my vegetable garden where my fig tree is. For some reason, they leave it alone. And I know fig growers, gardeners who have a heck of a time with squirrels. I knew this one gentleman in Baltimore who actually made little paper coverings for each individual fig. There was a drawstring at the top, and he would protect his figs with these little paper bags with the drawstring. And he swore to me that he saw the figs out of his window untying the drawstrings.
Oh, the squirrels.
Now, whether that's a
Yeah.
tall tale or not, I don't know. But um, so a lot of people do end up having to cover their figs. I know in Baltimore that was common
Hmm.
to keep the squirrels off them using some type of bird netting or whatever, that would keep squirrels out.
Hmm. And I think not just squirrels, but birds
Yeah,
um,
birds.
can really decimate a fig tree. And in
Yes.
general, like you said, you just get out there and try to pick them as soon as they're ripe enough for you,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe the critters get some of them. But it probably also depends on your local population and how hungry they are. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe
Yeah.
your squirrels, John, they have other things to
Yeah.
eat. And in the inner city
Right.
Baltimore, they're like waiting for those figs because they don't have much else to eat. But yeah.
That could very well be. And you can also tap, if you are troubled by ants that'll crawl into the little hole at the bottom, you can tap the fruits and they're just going to run out and you can brush them off.
Mhm. Yeah, I've just usually will put them in a bowl of water in
Mm-hmm.
the sink for a second, and the ants will be out then, or just shake them out, like you said.
Yeah.
Easy enough. And yeah, extra protein if they don't all get out.
Yeah.
So
A
just
true gardener has
yeah.
spoken.
So, let's talk about the best varieties for our region, and
Yeah.
then maybe some of the more unusual ones you can get a hold of. So, we always hear, I think, brown turkey is usually the top of the list.
Yeah, brown turkey, hardy Chicago, Celeste. We recommend those on our website, but there are others that are reported to be cold hardy by different growers, around the country. So uh, a few of these are Black Mission, which is a little larger than brown turkey and darker, the color of the fig. Cadota, green Ishia. LSU has some pretty good varieties that are cold hardy. LSU Purple and LSU Tiger. Adriatic, Brunswick, Marseille, Osborne. Those are some that we've either had reports of people in Maryland being very happy with them, or looking at recommendations from other reliable sites and universities, we feel pretty confident that those are going to be good varieties. And that's just a very small number. There are hundreds and hundreds of fig varieties. And so if you're really into them and you have the room, the sky's the limit.
Hmm. Yeah, I've seen those LSU tigers. They're so beautiful. You have
Hmm.
that beautiful streaking on them.
Yeah.
And I'm trialing right now in my garden Little Miss Figgy. So,
Oh,
like,
that's so funny. Yeah, we
yeah,
just got a question about a little Miss Figgy. Yeah, I'll be curious about that. Yeah. So you have it in a container, I guess.
yeah. So that one I'm
Okay.
keeping in a large container.
Yeah.
And it's its second year now, and I've only gotten a couple fruits the last 2 years. So
Yeah.
its first year I just got two. This year I just got two. So it's a small plant. It's meant to be
Mhm.
a dwarf container fig. I haven't had
Yeah.
to prune it at all. I haven't done
Sure.
anything else. Haven't fertilized it. So because it's in a container, that was going to be my question for you, John, is do you think I should be fertilizing it for more fruit production?
Probably. And I don't know, I guess it depends on the kind of fertilizer you use. If you use a dry fertilizer, you may only have to fertilize maybe twice during the growing season. If
Hmm.
you're using a liquid, more frequently. But yeah, container figs are going to need to be fertilized.
Yeah, I was thinking like a slow release um,
Hmm.
type of one with that. I would just apply that once or twice, and that's probably why. And I've not been very kind to this little Miss Figgy because I want to trial it for hardiness and keep it out in that container in winter. So it stayed
Yeah.
out there and it's been fine.
Yeah.
If it was a really harsh winter this winter, maybe I'll move it, up against a brick wall and give it a little bit better
Hmm.
protection.
Yeah.
Hmm. So, any final fig advice, or what would you say to somebody who's never grown a fig out there?
You got to try it. Ask people in your neighborhood who have figs about the possibility of getting a cutting if they have a really healthy plant that's producing well. You can go online and learn more about them. But if you've got an area, and you can contain figs, I mean, they do like to spread out, but you can prune them to contain them. So if you have an area that's at least, I would say 10 feet by 5 feet or so would be a good size area, then I think it's just a great plant to have in your landscape.
Hmm. And how would people contact you or find out more, John?
Sure. So if they just, in any search engine they like to use, just enter UMD space HGIC. You will have the Home and Garden Information Center come up high in the search. So we're Home and Garden Information Center, and we do have a fig page with some information that'll be helpful. There are also some real very active, exuberant fig growers out there. So, folks that have developed a little bit of a following, they have a website. These are people that are growing dozens and dozens of different types of fig trees. They have videos, and there's some very good information, from people that are super into figs. So, definitely check those out as well. I saw one I was following yesterday and today, Fig Boss, FIGBOSS.com. So it's a fellow in the Philly area. And I mean, he's growing hundreds of varieties and he's got a lot of very interesting information. He's deep into it. He researches the information, and it's really fun to see that level of, intensity around figs, because that's how we all learn new things, people that are super into it and sharing their knowledge.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge, John, and for encouraging more fig growers out there.
It's my pleasure. It's great speaking with you, Kathy.
You love listening to podcasts. Have you considered making your own podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I found it super easy to produce the GardenDC podcast. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Cleome plant profile. Spider flowers, Cleome Hassleriana, is an annual flower that blooms in midsummer to early fall. It is also known as grandfather's whiskers and spider legs. The flowers are usually pale to dark pink, purple, or white. The foliage is palm-shaped and the stems are somewhat spiky. It is native to South America and is hardy to USDA zones 10 to 11. It can grow to several feet tall, depending on the variety. It is surprisingly sturdy and normally doesn't need staking. There are more than 180 kinds of Cleome, including the fragrant Rose Queen and the compact Linda Armstrong. Senorita Rosalita is a newer introduction that is thornless, odorless, and sterile. Cleome does best in full sun and well-draining soils. They are fairly drought-tolerant and do not need fertilizing. They will die after being hit by a frost. Hummingbirds, butterflies, and other pollinators are highly attracted to this plant. Some theorize that bats are the main pollinator of it in its native tropical habitat. Cleome are easy to start from seeds, and they are prolific reseeders. Cleome, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, I noticed that my milkweed pods have burst open and are sending their cottony fluffs out into the world over the community garden plot. Still have lots of zucchini and peppers producing and a few cherry tomatoes as well. And we got in some cool season crop seeds, including our black Spanish radish, Danvers carrots, and 2 different types of arugula. In the local gardening world, a couple of events you might want to attend include Seed Saving Basics and Beyond, a workshop for all skill levels on Saturday, September 30th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The workshop is an ultimate suburban seed safari. It's an outdoor event at a covered area in Clinton, Maryland. There's a fee of $20, and you can register for it through Eventbrite. And it's all about understanding and exploring seed collecting in a natural suburban environment. And then on Saturday, October 7th at 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., I am giving a talk for Brookside Gardens on their virtual Zoom format, and that is Elevating Your Garden with Unusual Bulbs, Rhizomes, and Tubers. So if you're tired of the same old display and want to have some set it and forget it plants for your garden, join me for this talk. If you can't attend it live online, it will be recorded and available for registrants to watch afterwards. The fee is $15, and you can register for it at activemontgomery.org. The program code is PBG0116. And coming up a week or so after that, on October 13th and October 14th at the Joppa Grand Market in Joppa, Maryland, is the Baltimore African Violet Club 2-day autumn sale. And so they'll have African violets and many of their gesneriid cousins for sale. You can find out more about that at baltimoreafricanvioletclub.org. Happy gardening!
In the new book, The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Teri Speight, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space while also making a lush outdoor living area you'll crave spending time in. Whether you're growing edible plants or beautiful flowers, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the Urban Garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org. Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with the new book Groundcover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional, everyday grass lawn. In the last 3 years alone, over 23 million American adults converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now are looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn is knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Groundcover Revolution is here with all the answers you need. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Author Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the details on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Available at bookstores now and also at Quarto.com, where you can get 30% off using discount code GARDENING30.
Well, good day, everybody. It's Dr. A back in the garden with his last word. Actually, the more I think about it, it's anything but the last word on critters. Let me tell you, I am fighting a losing battle, of course, with all sorts of critters in my garden. And I'm not even talking about deer. That's for another day. But let's talk about all those cute little rats with tails, that is squirrels and chipmunks. Now, I don't mind squirrels. I understand that if I put out sunflower seeds for my birds, the squirrels like them as much, and I've got to do things about it. So, okay, I've started with getting squirrel-proof feeders. And they work pretty well, these squirrel-proof feeders. They actually are called just that. And, you know, when a squirrel gets on it, it goes down and they can't get the seeds. But what the manufacturers forgot is that chipmunks they weigh a tenth of what a squirrel weighs, so they get on there and nothing happens. They just have a grand old time. So that's okay. I've learned to live with it. So I've got baffles and everything else to keep the squirrels from climbing the pole, little realizing that they can jump about 300 feet. And so from a tree branch somewhere, they can jump to the pole on which this feeder is hung and still get in. Okay, so then I go the next step. And so then I go the next step, and we've got cayenne pepper. So the squirrels don't like cayenne pepper. So I can I can do my own thing or buy sunflower seeds with pepper, and I can find all sorts of pepper-related things that squirrels don't like. So we're having an ongoing battle here. But, I guess it's I put out that stuff, and then, well, what do you think? I mean, they're going to go for it. But what's really bugging me is when these darn squirrels start biting, and I mean literally taking a bite out of my tomatoes. Okay, then we're at war here. I plant my tomatoes, and I don't have a lot of room in my garden. I got all of 2 tomatoes. So when I see the fruit, and I love fresh tomatoes, I'm doing everything correct. I've got the fertilizer and the water and the sun and this, that, and the other thing. And don't the damn squirrels come along and take a chomp out of it. I mean, just one bite. Well, I know, I'm not kidding you now. Now we're at war. So, I can wrap the whole thing, I guess. I mean, wrap the whole plant and do whatever I do. So, but I've tried a couple things. So, it's about this pepper thing. So I made a spritzer, like a Windex spritzer with pepper juice. That is cayenne pepper, and I'm eating it on heating of water and dissolving cayenne peppers, and I mean I've even spread the peppers themselves. So that is the powder, cayenne powder, all over the plant, and it kind of works until it rains. And this spray is good too, but I mean it's having problems. So I thought I had it licked until then I come out the other day, just yesterday in fact, and 2 big bites are gone. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I've ordered organza bags. I don't know what an organza bag is, but there we go. Supposedly I'm gonna tie every tomato up in this bag, and hopefully the squirrels won't get it. But then again, I got a friend who has figs. So squirrels don't get figs, but birds sure do, and I love my birds. So I go to his place, and he's got these organza bags all over his figs, so the birds don't get them. And we love birds, both of us. We got, the cardinals and the cedar waxwings love figs as much as I love the cedar waxwings and, vireos and bluebirds, but whatever. But that's part of gardening, and that I don't mean to go on and on because, hey, they deserve as much space as we can possibly give them, but they got to stay off my tomatoes and my figs. That's all there is to it. Anyway, I know that you're enjoying the same critter heaven that I am. I hope that you're having more success, and it'll never be the last word, but for today, that's my last word on critters in the garden. Take care, stay dirty, see you soon.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to anchor.fm/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com. Thank you. You can find Washington Gardener online at WashingtonGardener.com, on Twitter at WDC Gardener, on Instagram at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook.com at Washington Gardener Magazine.